I think Evan McMullin is like a CIA ghoul who, you know, I have really very, very limited interest in never Trumpers from the Republican Party unless they are actively harming other Republicans. In that moment, on, let's say, a televised stage. And so let's play this clip because
this is a let him fight situation.
Exactly. This is I couldn't hope more that every Republican engages other Republicans and they eat each other. When I see reports that Mitch McConnell and Peter Thiel are feuding, I root for the feud. That's where I fall.
Yeah, like critical resources to whoever's behind.
Exactly.
Or on the attack.
Exactly. I am rooting for them to lock the cage, and until so that no one gets out. But Thiel and Mitch McConnell are fighting over. Thiel wants to pour money into Blake Masters because after he poured money into J.D. Vance, he wants his crew in the Senate. I'll remind you, incidentally, just apropos of nothing, the origin story of my little feud with Jimmy Dore came out of his podcast in 2016 where he was talking about it doesn't matter if Peter Thiel is named one of the Supreme Court justices.
Yeah, what's the difference?
What's the difference, I think was the quote. But here is Evan McMullin making fun of Utah Senator Mike Lee, who apparently has outed himself as having a propensity of referring to himself in the third person in a op-ed that he wrote in the Salt Lake City, I think it was, newspaper, something to the effect of, Mike Lee is a great guy. But here is McMullin.
Relatively quickly. And the first part of this, we've broken it into 4 questions. But this one is a very basic one that will go to the senator. Did Joe Biden fairly, that's the important word, did Joe Biden fairly win the 2020 presidential election?
Pause it. Here's Michael Lee. Yeah, first. He's going to answer first.
Yes, Joe Biden is our president. He was chosen in the only election that matters, the election held by the Electoral College. It was on that basis that I voted to certify the election results. The Electoral College cast its vote. Joe Biden won that. Now, as to whether there were errors, as to whether some states might have conducted their elections better than others, there's always room for debate and questions about that. Some people express concerns about the number of states using universal mail-in balloting for the first time in 2020. Unlike Utah, they hadn't tested it out. In Utah, we've got these signature verification protocols. We've got elaborate procedures for going through the voter registration rules to make sure that the wrong people who have died or moved out of state.
Pause it for 1 second. You know where they're not using signature verified rolls? You know where they're, do you know?
What?
It's a little state known as Florida.
Oh, Florida. I was going to say
Yes,
Arizona.
Governor DeSantis has said that you no longer have to do that if you're in one of the Republican counties hit by Hurricane Ian. I just thought I'd drop that in there.
But if you're in still like Miami or wherever.
Right, if you're in Miami, you still got to do it.
And it's also interesting that that a lot of candidates always bemoan like the delay in vote counting when a lot of those state legislators made it more difficult to count early votes earlier.
Totally.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Florida actually, before DeSantis changed this for some of the counties, that's the reason we got those votes so quickly in 2020 because they did not pass that piece of legislation. Pennsylvania took so many more days because they actually passed a law before to delay the count of early votes and provisional ballots.
But they're just wildly swinging, right? Anything that undercuts the appearances of the election, being fair, or anything that provides more hurdles for people, it's all a win for them if that's the case. But yeah.
All right, let's hear Mike Lee. He's looking so sincere.
Aren't voting. In other states, there were open questions about that, about ballot harvesting and things like that. But ultimately, what matters is the Electoral College, and the Electoral College won. I would add here, it's absolutely essential that the authority to conduct elections remain in state hands, never consolidated in federal hands where the risk of corruption is great. On this, my opponent and I disagree. My opponent has expressed support for legislation backed by the Democrats called S1. S1 would consolidate excessive authority over elections in the federal government. It would do so, moreover, in a way that would virtually cobble the states in their ability to enact voter security measures like voter ID. This is a bad step, and we should shun it like the plague.
Mr. McMullen.
Well, I certainly think it's important that we protect voters' rights and that we protect the peaceful transfer of power, Senator Lee. But for you to talk about the importance of the Electoral College, I think is rich. I think you know exactly how important it is. And I think you knew how important it was when you sought to urge the White House that had lost an election to find fake electors to overturn the will of the people. Senator Lee, that was the most egregious betrayal of our nation's Constitution in its history by a U.S. Senator, I believe, and it will be your legacy. Senator Lee is still casting doubt.
Please.
Look,
Ladies and gentlemen, you just took about 7 or 8 minutes away from the candidates. We're here to hear them.
Chastising
Lee,
the audience.
You advised spurious so-called legal efforts to mislead tens of millions of Americans that the election had been stolen. And congratulations, you succeeded. As recently as this year, and even tonight, you're still casting doubt on the legitimacy of the election.
No,
you're doing a tremendous disservice to this country, Senator Lee. You have betrayed your oath to the Constitution with this. It is and for this state, Utah, that was founded by people like my ancestors and yours.
Well, there you go. I mean, my favorite part is watching. There's something about like libertarians who they just cannot help themselves in being the most making the most nerdiest choices at any point. And the false bravado that guys like Lee and Ted Cruz have, they both have almost the exact same postures. They both have the same sort of like feigned, like, look at me, I'm a tough guy. I just can't, when I see Mike Lee like that, I just remember when Ted Cruz looked into that camera and said, Donald Trump, you are a punk, a 2-bit punk. And then like 3 weeks later, he's like, hey, can I get you, do you
Would you like to cast your vote for Donald Trump?
Do you want your exactly?
And he's like moving out of the frame to kind of just like leer while McMullen's talking. And then
he's pissed.
And he's waving to the moderator like he's hailing a cab. He's like, excuse me, can I get some time back, please?
Yeah, I mean, he just like Mike Lee comes off like a bully and a jerk, and Evan McMullen comes off like a dork. But they're
Can I talked with the lads at Brigham Young Money podcast about this race, and there's a bunch to say about Evan McMullen. First of all, folks should remember, like, as he's draping himself in the garb of democracy, that he was A, saying that he's to the right of Trump on abortion in 2016, and B, his entire gambit was to get a number of electors so he could have at the convention the party elites overrule the Republican voters and give him the nomination. And also he's a CIA guy. And also Mike Lee sucks, and I'm not one of the leftists who downplays the threat to democracy from the Republican Party. But Mike Lee, the one thing he has done is work with Bernie Sanders and Chris Murphy on the limiting war powers stuff. Yeah. And to see a CIA guy replace him for that, like, it's kind of a wash.
Oh, without a doubt. No, I don't think there is any. There's nothing decent that comes out of that. I just hope it hurts the brand of all of them.
Right.
That's the best thing that could come out of it. They both lose, if that's possible. Folks, we're going to head into the fun half.
Whoa.
Time just flew in that hour.
I know. Well, we got a lot. I mean, 21 days.
21 days before the election.
Gosh, I was hoping
I'm starting. I had like a nightmare last night that was involved like the Republicans winning. So I'm starting to actually.
Well, prepare yourself.
Early voting is happening in at least half the states by now, folks. So get on it. Vote. Get your friends to vote. Get your family to vote. Just get out there, vote. It's not going to take you more than, I don't know, an hour or two, max. Just do it.